In this video, seemingly filmed in a storm, what do you do when your brakes fail and you've got an electronic parking brake? How does that work? Now the fun thing here is I haven't got a clue. If you had brake failure in a conventional car with a conventional handbrake, you could gently apply the handbrake to bring the car to a halt. That is why in America it's called an e-brake. It's your emergency brake, it's the backup brake. It's worth pointing out, complete failure of brakes quite unlikely. Even if you blew a pipe on a more modern car, and by modern I mean anything built after probably the early 1980s, it will have dual circuit brakes. So even if one circuit goes, there will still be enough stopping power to bring you to a halt. That is indeed the theory. Hopefully not many of us get to test that in practice. I have driven cars around on private ground using just the handbrake, and it's just that easing up and gentle application that means you can safely stop. But an electronic parking brake usually acts quite quickly, so I don't know how this is going to work. I've never done this, never even attempted it before. Before we get into it, I'm also going to be answering some questions from HubNut Channel Members that they have asked specifically about this car. We've already published a test. You can go and watch the full review of this car. It's a Dacia Jogger. It's the Extreme 110 TCE, so it's got the turbo 1 litre petrol. But I'm going to answer some more questions specifically from channel members very soon. But first of all, we've got a very quiet one-way country lane that I think will be perfect for this test. So without further ado, let's do it. Let's get the engine running. Oh, lifted the clutch too early, it doesn't like that. So I'm going to get up to about 20 miles an hour, and then I'm going to pull the switch up and it should eventually activate. I'm going to try and keep the steering as straight as possible, because if we lock up the back wheels we could go all Tokyo drift yo, and we don't want to be doing that. It's a narrow lane, we don't really want to end up in a field. So let's go. I've never done this. We pull away, the handbrake releases, there it goes. That's second gear. Let's get us up to about 20 miles an hour. And then I'm going to pull. Oh, wow. Okay, that was much quicker than expected. That locked up instantly. That was remarkable. Now it seems to have locked the brakes on. There we go. So handbrake released again. So that was quite undramatic. That actually worked quite well. It was very, very abrupt. But maybe we should try a bit faster. Oh gosh. I actually stalled the engine there, which has restarted itself. That makes me feel a lot more comfortable. That application was actually quite, it was abrupt, but it seemed to hold off locking up completely until the speed was much lower. So it safely brought us to a halt without me going anywhere near the brake pedal. That's quite interesting. I've wanted to know what that feels like for some time. So we'll go and park up, and then we can go through the member questions on this car. But yeah, that was way quicker than I expected. I would have thought there would be some delay in case you accidentally pulled the button or something like that. But yeah, very impressed with that. That was educational for all of us, I think. Let's jump into the questions from channel members. X-Power Zone asks, what are the ergonomics, the entertainment system like when accessing car functions? With some new cars, trying to turn off lane keep involves multiple submenus, is very distracting while driving. Well, I'm pleased to say this car does not have lane departure, which is I think it scores less on the Euro NCAP because it doesn't have that feature fitted. Here are the menus. You've got smartphone integration, you've got nav, but I've never used the onboard nav. I've just used Google Maps through my phone. And if we go into vehicle settings, there are but two. That is it. You can turn the active braking and the blind spots on and off. So the blind spot is a little light that appears on the mirrors, just to indicate there's someone in your blind spot. Active braking, there's some sort of radar, so if you were coming up to a car without braking, it would warn you and then it would do the braking for you. That is all the settings on the menu. You can go and find out about driving eco, Apparently that's how I'm doing, 64 out of 100. I'm doing very good anticipation. I'm doing rubbish gear shifts apparently, and there's eco coaching, but you know, just ignore that, it's fine. Otherwise, yeah, there isn't a lot there. There's an awful lot done by buttons. So you've got the cruise control here, but you know, you've got conventional stalks for handling most of the stuff, including the radio down here. But yeah, it's fairly simple as these things go, and that is the average consumption, which I think answers the later question. Having a 3-cylinder engine, is it less smooth at tick over? Well, I mean, the truth is, you can barely hear, you can feel a mild lumpiness, because obviously a 4-stroke cycle, a 4-cylinder engine is the best approach for smoothness, and more cylinders adds more smooths, which is why V12s run like sewing machines. So it doesn't feel lumpy in the car, and I have to say the engine will pull at stupendously low revs quite happily as well. It will pull below 1500 revs and feels like it wants to. It doesn't feel like it's rattling the engine mounts out. So thank you, engine, you can shut up now. I'm going to say that it is very smooth. Oh, typically Indecisive Auto asks, how is the refinement? I know 3-cylinder engines can be a little buzzy. This one is very well insulated, and like I say, because it's got a heavy flywheel, it seems very, very smooth even at low revs. I'll have to see Indecisive just after I film this. S-Rich GTR, what's the stereo like? Pretty good. It sounds really nice. The bass could be deeper. If you're listening to drum and bass, it's not quite there. But yeah, it sounds very, very good for a decent, for a normal sort of sound system. Terrybus13, when will a jogger permanently join the HubNut fleet? When they're cheaper. And they go on to say, I do think Dacia have missed the trick by not offering the jogger in the UK with the diesel engine. They haven't offered it in Europe. The only place you can get a jogger with a diesel engine is North Africa. It's a sign of how hated diesel has become. But to be honest, having driven this one around, I'm not sure why you'd bother. It's got diesel-esque torque and diesel-esque economy, which we'll get to more in a minute. Scottish Car Enthusiasts and Trains TV, good old Davey with a smart. How does the jogger compare size-wise to a Logan MCV? I would say it's a bit bigger. I don't think the Logan MCV ever offered 7 seats, but effectively the jogger replaced the Logan MCV, the Logi, which is like an MPV, and also the Docker, which was the Dacia equivalent of the Berlingo based on a Kangoo. All 3 vehicles were replaced by the jogger. Frank Waltius, is it suitable as a tow vehicle? It's rated, this and the hybrid version are rated at 1200 kilograms and 750 if it's unbraked. So pretty decent, that's about the same as the Berlingo. Dave Curran, how does it rate for physical buttons versus touchscreens? I think we've gone through that. The heater controls are all on manual controls, and I like that. I want to quickly be able to operate lights. I want to be able to quickly operate demisting and heater things. I remember driving a P12 Primera and the heater controls were all on a touchscreen. Utterly horrific. Terrible idea. Anthony Gregg 862, I spend a lot of time on the motorway. I currently have a Mazda 3 and motorway speeds, it's just over 2000 revs. How does this compare? Also, what is the economy? Well, we've just seen the economy. The economy, we're averaging 50, doing a little better than that at motorway speeds. And I was generally doing the motorway speed limit on the way back from Hampshire. And in terms of revs, I think it's about 2,300 at 70. So it's pretty low. It's a very tall 6th gear. You can't even think about entertaining 6th gear unless you're doing more than 50 miles an hour. Edward Allen Newton, which is the better vehicle and will the jogger tow Bob? I think that's compared to Bella Berlingo. I mean, ultimately this is a better vehicle, but it's not one we can afford, so we're sticking with a Berlingo. The Berlingo is more comfortable, both in ride comfort and seats, but much worse in terms of safety and actually running properly. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. Would the jogger tow Bob? Yeah, it could easily tow Bob. Tudor Coca, isn't it a bit underpowered with a 1-litre engine? No. If you've watched my test already, you'll see that it can get a shift on it. I mean, it's not going to set the tyres alight, but it does go pretty darned well. Right family, being a 7-seater and only a 1-litre, is it actually capable to cope fully loaded? Now, this is something we wish we'd done, but we can't find enough people locally to fill the car and go for a drive. Quite a lot of people are away at the moment. Tim's in London, and Whiteland are busy battling various diseases. Yeah, I think it'd be all right, but I can't say. We haven't tested it. It's certainly got more grunt than, say, a 2-litre petrol Ford Galaxy MPV 7-seater. So I think it'd be all right. They go on to say, have they done what all 7-seaters do and forgotten when fully loaded that you need luggage space? Well, what are you meant to do? You can't physically make the car any more massive, or it just becomes ridiculous. So 7 seats is always going to be a compromise. You're always going to be eating into the luggage area. Roof box, one way of dealing with that, or have less people. But I'm struggling to think of many 7-seaters over the years that still offer good boot space even when all seats are in use. The Citroen CX Safari, perhaps, still has an okay boot, but they are enormous. They're like 5 meters long, and that just brings more downsides. Most people don't want to be driving around in a 5 meter long car for the occasional time they'll be using all the seats. Richard Honeyburn just says that the front badge is almost a DeLorean. Yep, seems fair. Adrian M, a good indicator of usability is the need to refer to the owner's manual. Have you referred to it much? Not really. I referred to it a little bit. What was I trying to work out? I was trying to get to the bottom of the extreme grip and see what that actually does. I'm not really any clearer on that. And the use of the rear seats. I wondered if there was an option to move the whole seat forward in one piece, but no, you just have to tumble it and then clamber into the rearmost seats. So that is why I've looked at the manual. The manual is right here, and the manual is enormous. But it does also cover the Sandero stepway, and the Logan being the saloon version of the Sandero that we don't get in the UK. So it is chonk. And that doesn't cover the multimedia. The multimedia has its own book. Accessory for recreational facilities. Oh, what are those facilities then? Oh gosh, that's things like the sleep kit that it doesn't have. Sorry, this one is the multimedia user, but that covers several different languages as well. So that is a big old chunk of thing. That is quite a sizable thing. And you get this intriguing device as well, which I think is for the roof bars, because with this you can then put the roof bars in roof bar mode rather than aerodynamic mode. So there you go, that's quite interesting. Back to the questions. X-Power Zone, you've already asked one question, I think. How does driving small capacity turbo engine compare with a larger capacity natural aspirated producing the same power? Are there any drawbacks of using a small higher powered engine in everyday driving? I don't think so. Occasionally it can be a bit peaky and a bit lively in first gear, I've found. And you don't always know exactly what sort of throttle response you're going to get in the lower gears. But most of the time, you kind of forget it's a turbo. It drives like a larger capacity engine. You can't believe it's just 1 litre. So maybe drawbacks in the longer term in terms of reliability, but it's worth remembering you're not driving flat out all the time. And because this engine has such power, it's not like my foot is mashed into the floor. You're often driving, probably with most 50-60% of the engine. So yeah, most of the time you just don't even think about it. I may have missed some questions, unfortunately. We'll have to come back to those, but yeah, there we go. That is some of the questions. I think I may have missed a chunk. I'm very sorry. I haven't got them printed with me. I'm recording on my phone, so I can't even check. Let me just have a quick look though. Right, the 2 questions I've missed. One was by Richard Baz saying he would never drive a car with such a small engine. We do all the time. And saying that you'd have to wring its neck. And you just don't. You don't have to wring its neck at all. Most of the time, I'm not going above 3,000 revs. It's actually very relaxing. Because it's got the turbo and it cuts in nice and early, it just means you can get down the road really well. And the other question was regarding the electronic handbrake, which I think we've discussed. But my overall thoughts of the electronic handbrake are, it is actually I quite quickly get used to the convenience of it auto-releasing when I drive off. And that is quite nice. But it does make a horrible noise. And it just feels like another thing to go wrong. If you go for the entry-level jogger, you get a conventional handbrake. So if technology upsets you, you can go even more low tech than this extreme top of the range model, and then you get a proper stick with a button. You know, they seem to have worked for most of the life of the motor car. I'm not sure why they felt the need to change that particularly. Now you've just got motors that can go wrong and cause all sorts of issues further down the road. But of course, manufacturers don't particularly care about that. Hopefully it'll be out of warranty by then. Day after the first video on the Dacia Jogger went live, so we can add in some corrections and replies to the comments. So let's jump into it. Firstly, I think all models in the UK actually have the cruise control and the smartphone integration. Apparently the extreme level gets you nav on top, and the base model even has a proper handbrake. Something else I failed to demonstrate is the fact that we do actually have a reversing camera, which shows you your planned trajectory as well. So that is definitely useful, makes up a bit for the compromised rear vision. There is a radio, and you can silence it. Note we've got silence going on, but the DAB signal, especially here in Wales, is absolutely terrible. We found it better to use Android Auto and stream from BBC Sounds. Other radio stations are available. I also commented that the seatbelt could get trapped here, but lots of you spotted this here. So you can actually slide the belt up and then pivot it into there, and that keeps the seatbelt out of the way and stops it getting caught there. So thanks to everyone who told us about that one. Also need to do a correction on the cup holder situation, because if you open up the tables, you can then pull them out, and then there is a really small cup holder. I don't think that's going to be good for very much at all, to be honest, but nonetheless, cup holders do exist in the rear. They're just under these flimsy tables. Something else people pointed out is that if someone is sat here with the 3-point seatbelt in the middle of the car, well, it's not much fun for the people sitting in the back who now have a seatbelt kind of against their face. Bit of a design flaw there, I think, but maybe that's just one of the compromises you live with on the cheapest 7-seater in the UK. We must also address the fact that this doesn't represent the latest Dacia Jogger. This is a 2023 plated car. It doesn't meet the current standards. Unfortunately, you must now mandatory have lane departure systems fitted. Sadly, this doesn't have it, so I don't know how difficult it is to turn off. Also, they've updated the collision protection, so it does now take account of pedestrians and cyclists. So that is an improvement. That is mandatory kit that is demanded in the European Union, and therefore also in the UK, because we still follow their specifications. Yeah, you must have lane keep assist or lane departure protection, whatever. Not a good move, I don't think, on the part of the legislators. Just add annoyance that you can't ignore. Not ideal. So yeah, if you've got a 2024 Jogger, I'd be interested to know, can you turn the lane departure off? Will it stay off? Be very interested to know. Presumably it also must have the mandatory speed limiters, which can be overridden as well. I love the fact I've turned the light on and it's still turned the light off. There are some aspects of this car which do irritate me. That is one of them. The other one being the stereo that you can't have on for more than a couple of minutes. Very irritating. A good example, there's a drive-in cinema in Carmarthen that we're probably going to go to in one of our other cars. And imagine being there. When we were there, we heard cars would keep starting their engines and turn off again. And I think this must be why. It was the only way they could keep the stereo on. You use your car stereo to watch the drive-in movie. So again, real world situations that haven't been accounted for. Another correction, Dacia did indeed build its reputation up like Skoda by using older Renault technology, but the platform and the engine of the Jogger are actually current Renault, also used in the Clio and the Captur. So gone are the days of it being old tech. And just to confirm, the engine has a timing chain. It doesn't have a timing belt. It certainly doesn't have a wet belt. Rumours that the chain can get a bit slack by 60,000 miles. I imagine modern service intervals don't help with that. Maybe change the oil a bit more regularly. Also, lots of people reporting that the 1 litre has clutch issues. I don't know if they've rectified that. It's impossible for me to tell in this test. Oh yeah, I didn't mention the side exit exhaust. I didn't realise it had one, but I don't know if you can see under there. Let's pop some light on. It has got quite the burble to it. Interesting. I didn't know side exit exhausts were a thing. Another correction, the hilariously titled Extreme Grip disables the traction control to allow wheel spin. If you're stuck in mud or snow, you don't want the engine cutting power every time there's a slight wheel slip. You actually need some wheel slip to keep your momentum going. So that's what that button does. Grip extend, loose surface on. So there you go. Wheel spin mode is possible. There's one other thing, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear it over the noise of the fan. Let me turn it down and see if you can hear it. There it goes. And off it goes. Can you hear that? I don't know if you can hear that. Let's do it another cycle. On. Off. It sounds absolutely horrendous, the aircon compressor, and I don't know if that's a fault on this car or if that's how they are. You can't hear it outside the car. It seems to just set off a resonance inside the car, and when you're driving around town it sounds absolutely horrific. So there you go. You can take in the grille at this moment as well. The Dacia Jogger, we've done the extreme handbrake maneuver. We've also answered some of your questions, so huge thanks to the channel members for answering the questions. I'm going to go now. I've got to go and film a Volvo road test in this lovely weather, and we'll see you in a future video. Farewell.